look directly into my eyes, still wearing the sunglasses.
Can I at least get some ketchup for my apple?
Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be discussing the black-eyed children. But before we get started, I'm Sophia Lovelace and I post paranormal videos, theater videos, comedy videos. So you want to make sure that you subscribe down below to be notified when I have new uploads. You can also hit the bell icon to be one of the first people notified when I have those uploads. Since my Robert the Doll video has become so popular, you guys love it so much, I decided that I am going to do more paranormal videos on here because you guys tend to like the paranormal stuff. And I mean, this shouldn't be a surprise for me because literally since the start of my channel, when I did a video ghost hunting in a library or a haunted library, you guys have been commenting,
More paranormal videos.
More ghost videos.
and I've been like,
Oh, okay, I'll post the occasional one.
but now I'm gonna start actually sit down and scheduling paranormal videos because you guys have been asking for it, and when I give it to you guys, you actually love it. So therefore, we're filming more paranormal videos. So today we're going to be discussing the black-eyed children, what are they, and also 5 stories of people who have actually had encounters with the black-eyed children. Ooh. Now, people have different theories of where these black-eyed children come from and what they are. Some stating that they're vampires, others stating that they're shapeshifters, some claiming that they're
Demons.
and some claiming that they're extraterrestrial aliens. Which is just crazy if you think about it because these things are so different from each other, yet somehow there is some very good arguments for each, which is disturbing. So people who have encountered these black-eyed children have very similar stories to each other. So these children are said to come and either knock on your door, or if you're in your car, they'll come up to you when you're in your car or about to get into your car, and they will always ask you something. A common one is asking to use your phone. Another common one is asking if they can get a ride if you're near your car or in your car. And if at first you refuse, they'll keep pushing you and pushing you. Some people having stories that these children get angry and upset. Other stories claim that these children start crying. And nobody knows what happens if you actually follow through with what they're asking for. And of course, it makes one wonder, what are these black-eyed children doing? And of course, these black-eyed children earn their name by having black eyes. Now, it is not just their pupil or their irises, which are the colored part of your eye, that are black, it's the entire eye. These children tend to be between the ages of 6 and 16, some people claiming that they look 17 or 18, but usually the most common range is between the ages of 6 and 16. Usually from the stories that I have read, there usually is 2 black-eyed children, one pretending to be the older sibling and one pretending to be the younger sibling. They are said to have super pale skin, and people tend to have a feeling of uneasiness as soon as they encounter them or right before they meet and encounter them. Some of these stories have happened during Halloween night, and people have noted that these children aren't wearing costumes. Some people claim that they could be time travelers because they're not up to date with technology. For example, they're going up to people's houses asking if they can use the phone, and most people don't have home phones anymore. There was one story in the stories that I'm going to be reading to you where someone states that the black-eyed children asked if they could use a telegraph, which nobody has used in a very long time. And it says here in the article that I'm about to read from, which is from Thought Catalog, that the earliest sighting of the black-eyed children was in 1996 by a man named Brian Bethel. Also, it states in this article that these stories and this story was put into the creepypasta lore. So if you don't know what creepypasta is, it's basically the website that created urban legends such as Slender Man and Jeff the Killer. All of the stories on creepypasta are fake, even though sometimes they claim to be real, they're all fake. So the fact that this man went out of his way to tell the people who run creepypasta that is a true story, take it down, it should not be part of official lore because it is 100% true, I think adds credibility to the story. So the first sighting was during the late 90s. However, in 2014, a British newspaper reported that people are having more experiences with the black-eyed children. So the first story on this list is Trick or Treat. Yesterday, I noticed my neighbor hadn't put out all his Halloween decorations, lights, etc. yet. The past 2 years, I've lived next to him and he's gone all out for Halloween. I don't know him well. He's younger, single, but I know he likes kids. I got home from work and I saw him outside and I said something along the lines of, "Hey man, you better get your Halloween stuff up or else the house down the street is gonna beat you for the best Halloween decorations." He kind of smiles sheepishly and says that he's actually going to keep his house dark this year and just put candy out. I asked if he was going out of town, but he said no. Something happened last year that really scared him. Now, I was concerned for my own safety if some weirdos were coming around the neighborhood, which is a pretty safe neighborhood with tons of young families living here. So I asked him what happened. He said last year he had his brother's family over so they could trick or treat in the neighborhood since they live in an apartment complex that doesn't do much for Halloween. He had a bunch of kids come to the door like always. His family took off around 10:30 and there were only a few older trick-or-treaters. By 11:30, they were pretty much done. So he was inside watching TV and the doorbell rings. He grabs the candy bowl and heads over. Noticing that it's a little past midnight and that's pretty rude for trick-or-treaters to still be out. And then he noticed he hasn't turned his light off yet. He swings the door open and is about to yell boo or something to freak him out, but stops dead when he sees kids at the door. He said one was probably 13 to 14 and the other was 16 to 17, both boys. They weren't dressed up, but he remembers the older one was wearing a flannel checkerboard shirt. He was immediately overcome with uneasiness, like opening the door was a huge mistake. They just stared at him and he noticed that they had really big irises and dilated pupils. He couldn't even see the whites of their eyes, so he just figured they were contact lenses. He was frozen holding the bowl of candy, like he couldn't slam the door in their face as much as he wanted to. So he nervously tried to smile at them, hoping that they would break character and ask for candy or something. The younger one said that they had gotten lost and needed to come inside and use the phone. That was when he closed the door more than halfway to them and then said, "No, sorry." And the older one said something like, "Can we wait inside your house until our parents come and get us?" But by then he was convinced that his life was in danger and these kids must be high on something or intending to rob him, and he just kept mumbling, "No, sorry, good night," as he inched the door closer and locked it. So after the writer heard this, they said, "Man, that sounds really crazy. It sounds like the Black-Eyed Kids." He swears to me up and down that he had never heard of Black-Eyed Kids before, and it's so similar to what happened to him. So we talked a while longer and told him that quite a few people probably know about the urban legend, and it's possible it was just teenagers with black contact lenses trying to freak out people on Halloween. But he said the fear he felt was so primal and came over him that the second he opened the door. Now that is a pretty interesting story. Now a lot of the stories I'm going to be reading after this state that all these people knew about black-eyed children, and some have even stated that there is theories that as soon as you know about the black-eyed children that you're going to be visited by them. Now I've known about the black-eyed children for about a year now and they haven't paid a visit yet, so The second story is every story I've read about them is from someone who already knew about them. So like I said before, this person claims that every story that they've read, these people knew about the black-eyed children, but the story we've just read, this person had no idea who they are. So was that previous story just an outlier or an anomaly? Or Did he actually encounter the black-eyed children? Last night was like any other night. I was switching between listening to music and watching YouTube videos with one headphone in so I could hear my infant daughter if she cries. Just as I dozed off, I heard a thumping coming from the front porch. Startled at first, I opened my eyes wide and scanned the room. Realizing it was most likely my cat scratching himself on the front porch, I dozed back off. It wasn't until I got to my daughter's room that the creepiness set in. The thump had moved from the kitchen to the bedroom windows. Both windows. A room apart, thumping in perfect time. I went out to the kitchen, unlocked and opened the doors. Standing there looking up at me was two 10 or 11-year-old boys. The feeling of dread and the smell of mold almost made me vomit. The smaller of the two then spoke up and said, "May we use your telegraph?" Huh? I just stared blankly at these boys, horrified of what I then realized. Their eyes were pitch black. He asked again, "Can I use your telegraph?" I tried to play it cool and ignore the fact that he didn't say telegraph or phone or cell, anything that would have made any sense of the situation, and calmly replied, "I don't have service at my house. Sorry." The expressions on their faces turned to rage as I finished my sentence. Swiftly, I shut the door and locked it as quickly as I could. I felt helpless and afraid. I lied there for what felt like hours until I heard it, my wife's alarm clock. The thumping stopped the instant the alarm went off, and I crept into the master bedroom with the baby. I was aware of black-eyed kids, but she wasn't. Every story I've read about them is from someone who already knew about them. Maybe just knowledge of them existing is the only reason they visit. So the next one is really interesting, and I don't know how I feel about it. This one, I don't know if he had an encounter with a black-eyed kid or if he just encountered someone who was just creepy. The incident took place about 13 years ago. I had just moved to a new city with my wife. We were small-town newlyweds from the Midwest. We moved cross-country to one of the biggest cities in the Southwest so I could attend graduate school. Being naive and new to city living, I habitually answered the door without a second thought. Never again after this. So the first thing I noticed was the fact that someone was knocking at 6 a.m. in the morning. The second thing that should have dawned on me is that this kid had to reach over a rather tall patio gate to unlatch and open it. The moment I opened the door, I was overtaken by an inexplicable sense of fear. To this day, I can picture him. Teenager, average height, average build, knee-length black leather trench coat, short black hair, and sunglasses. The sunglasses at 6 a.m. struck me as odd, and even more odd, he was eating an apple. He was very polite and asked if he could come in and warm up. I said no, closed the door, and slid the security chain to place. A moment later, another knock. I opened the now chained door, and before I could speak, he asked again if he could come in and warm up. No, I replied and attempted to close the door. Before the door shut, he put his hand out, stopping the door on its hinges. He looked directly into my eyes, still wearing the sunglasses. "Can I at least get some ketchup for my apple? Get the hell out of here. My wife is calling the police." He takes a moment to let this information sink in, then lowers his glasses, revealing his eyes are all black. "No. You won't be calling anybody." At that moment, I forced the door closed and locked it, and called out to my wife. She is scared and hiding in the bedroom. I ripped the curtains back to look out the window to the next door. He's gone. Absolutely no trace of him. I go out on the patio and check the gate. It's still latched from the inside. What? So he must have jumped or something. That's so weird. That was messed up, I think to myself, and as I turned to enter the house, I noticed a half-eaten apple lying on the ground. Number 4. I'd be lying if I told you I didn't know about the black-eyed children before this happened to me. In the moment, that idea never crossed my mind. But afterwards, yes. They were definitely black-eyed children. I'm a writer trying to make it in Hollywood, so I spend most of my free time writing. When this happened, I was working mostly in the mornings and the afternoons. I would get home, hit the gym, and then settle in for an evening in front of the computer. There was a knock on my door, and I got up to answer it. And as soon as I did, a chill went through my body. I don't scare easy, and I wasn't exactly afraid, but I was having a visceral experience all over my body. A base fear reaction. "Yes?" I said. "Who is it?" A boy's voice answered, "We need to use your phone." "Yeah, that's not gonna happen." They finally walked away. Not to any of the other of the 8 doorways within 15 feet. Not to ask anyone else. Before they could have gone more than a dozen yards, curiously, I yanked the door open, running after them to see who it was and where they were headed. The courtyard of the complex was completely empty. Afterwards, I thought the experience fit the stories of the black-eyed children. I kicked myself for not opening the door. Coming face to face with black-eyed children? How cool would that have been? And then I remembered the feeling. My skin crawling and the certain knowledge in me in that moment. There was no way in hell I was opening that door. Now this story is interesting because it kind of shows that black-eyed children directly target people. They weren't just looking for anyone. They particularly went to his apartment, and when he said no, they didn't go to anyone else, which I find fascinating, interesting, and terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. And for the 5th story on this list, it is titled, "He Told Me Never to Agree to Help Them." It was a cold October evening, not too far off from Halloween. The evening was slowly creeping by, so I decided to go to the corner store. During my walk, I see the normal, the occasional person putting on Halloween decorations and kids playing in their yards. But this story is about something far more sinister. I remember seeing 2 teenagers about the age of 14 knocking on a door asking to use the phone, which of course I thought was weird because most teens have phones these days. As I kept walking, they stopped and stared at me for a short moment. I felt the blood in my veins chill. I felt so creeped out I hurried to the next block. The next block seemed fine, until I looked behind me and saw 2 teens were following me. I took off sprinting to the store at this point. I saw the sign of the store, and relief washed over me. I opened the door and told the cashier what happened on the way here. He looked at me slightly creeped out and told me a story about this happening to him in his hometown and how they found him the day he left and asked for his help. He told me never to agree to help them. He told me another story, but at that point I was no longer paying attention because they were standing at the door asking to be let in. The cashier freaked out and locked the door. They wouldn't step away from the door. It had been an hour. The cashier and I were ready to fight our way out, but instead he took me out the back way. The one teen came around the back just as we shut the door behind us. "Can you help me?" is all he could say. He was closing in on us, and his eyes, they were black as a starless night. They were peering right into my soul. I couldn't help but gaze into his eyes. The terror. I couldn't remember too much of what happened next, but I do recall the sounds of the struggle. The cashier was struggling with both teens. He was calling out to me for help. I ran towards them, grabbed him by his collar, and pulled him between the 2, and knocking them over in the process. I didn't look behind me until I was at my house. The cashier was gone, but the teens were still following behind. I ran into my house, closed all the blinds, and turned the music up. I got lucky that day, but I'm not sure how long I can keep out of their grasp. I tried to find and thank the cashier for saving my life that day, but he didn't show up to work after that. I asked his boss, and he told me he called over the phone and quit. He was moving. To this very day, I sometimes feel the fear of those eyes watching me as I drive to work. I sometimes will look out my window and swear I see them watching my house from a couple blocks away, waiting for their next chance. Now this story is interesting for several reasons. This is the first story that I've read where someone's actually got into a physical fight with these children. The second interesting thing about this story is that he lost the cashier when he was running away at the end, but then then he never saw him again, and his boss said that he just called over the phone and quit. Now this makes me wonder if actually this cashier did decide to move because he was so freaked out after having another encounter with the black-eyed children, or if they had gotten to the cashier and mimicked him on the phone, pretending that they were him, and quit. So just the idea that he moved away is really, really disturbing because we really don't know what happened to him or if it was actually him who quit. And the third interesting thing about this story is that the narrator, or the person telling the story, encountered these kids before going and meeting the cashier, who also happened to have an experience with the black-eyed children previously. Like, that is just a bizarre coincidence. So what do you guys think about the black-eyed children? Is it real? Is it all just an urban legend that has no truth in it whatsoever? Do you think that this is just children and kids and teens playing pranks on people, especially since a lot of these stories happen around Halloween? Make sure to leave your thoughts down below what you think these black-eyed children are. If you like this video, make sure to hit the subscribe button for more paranormal content, and also hit that bell icon to be the first to be notified when I have new uploads. And I think that's it for today, and bye!